Yo, this is Gerald Cooper. I'm the founder of Hood Mid-Century Modern on Instagram, and you're now listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Joining us today in the studio is designer and builder Alicia Hylton-Daniel, owner of the Durham, North Carolina firm Hylton-Daniel. Later on, from Romania, it's the creator of the wildly popular Of Houses blog, architect Daniel Munteanu. And now, here's your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Some of our listeners are also users of our website, which I wanted to share with you about today, usmodernist.org. I started this in 2007, and by 2009, it had become apparent that the surge of interest in this was no longer going to be a hobby. Today, U.S. Modernist has 12 staff and key volunteers working to document, preserve, and promote residential modernist architecture. Before I share about these sites, though, fair warning, both are immense rabbit holes. If you're into modernist design, and I have to think you are, you could spend hours here. At least once a week, I get an email stamped 3 a.m. from someone in the world who found our archives around 9 p.m. and just couldn't stop. NC Modernist is all about North Carolina modernist houses and architects. We think we've documented just about everything in the state, about 5,000 in total. For U.S. Modernist, though, it's much larger. We've found 20,000 houses by 100 of the most famous architects in America. Every Wright, every Schindler, every Lautner, every Neutra, every Elwood, every Gwathmey, it just goes on and on. And in our magazine library, we've scanned 4.1 million pages of architecture magazines going back 120 years and made them text searchable, most for the first time. So if you're looking for that weird house at the end of the street you grew up on, and you knew it was published somewhere in the 1950s, we likely have it. There are over 10,000 digitized issues of mainstream magazines, AIA magazines, and specialty regional magazines. We've been scanning since 2013, and boy are we tired, and we're still adding about 1,000 pages a day on average. Last but not least, Tom and I turn out the podcast each week just for you on U.S. Modernist Radio. Since 2015, over 300 shows with over 500 guests from around the world, like Romania.
Yay!
U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Durham, North Carolina modernist house designer and general contractor Alicia Hylton-Daniel was born in Jamaica, the country, not New York, and raised in Long Island, which is in New York. Starting first as a paralegal, her career as one of the area's celebrated design-build firms started in 2002, when she was inspired to pursue a dream in the arts, and in 2008, when she graduated from Meredith College in interior design. After a few successful years working for other firms, she got her general contractor's license and designed her first new build, a house she called Modernist 1. There's been Modernist 2, 3, and 4 as well. Get the picture? We love this naming system. Alicia's now hard at work on a new project. Wait for it, Modernist 5.
Everyone, please welcome one of my favorite modernists, Alicia Hylton-Daniel.
Thank you, George. It's great to be here.
That, by the way, is our new virtual studio audience.
I like that. Do that again, Tom.
You like it?
Yeah.
I can make him cry. I can make him sing. You like tap dancing?
Awesome.
Okay.
The crowd really likes you, Alicia.
I'm flattered.
You should be.
When we take people on our Modapalooza house tours twice a year, they always ask about your houses. They've really become a hit.
I love it. I didn't know that, so I'm glad to hear.
Yeah. You are putting together very intricate, relatively small houses, infill projects in neighborhoods. How did you start doing this?
It all started when I was working my day job. I was a commercial interior designer. I had taken a job at a firm close to home, so I was in Durham. And I had a lot of free time. I think I started at that firm and they were sort of confused on how to use me because I knew so much. I loved project management and I loved design. And so at the time, we had bidded on a house on the west end side of Durham. And we had lost the bid. So we had won the bid, and then I think you get like 10 days that anyone can outbid you.
This is a city property or
Yeah,
something?
it's a city properties on the west end side of Durham, so sort of like Moorhead, Lakewood area. And we ended up getting the house because the person that owned the house, as long as they pay the taxes, they get the house back before the auction ends. So we ended up working with that homeowner, which was a better way anyway. This way, that person was able to make a profit off of the home. What had happened is that his father had passed on 10 years ago, and taxes were not paid on the house. So we got the house. Immediately, we knew that we had to tear it down. The house was vacant for over 10 years. No one had even cleaned out the refrigerator.
Oh, no.
Exactly.
Oh.
When the home, yes. So it was a bad situation. There were just a lot of other variables as well. It had rained in the house. It needed a new roof probably 12 years earlier. So we took it down. And I remember going to the city. At the time, I was really green about residential design. So I went to planning and explained that I wanted to design this house. And, Durham's small enough that we can have those relationships with our planning department. And I remember the plan reviewer saying, this is a non-conforming lot, meaning that it was a predominantly African-American neighborhood and they didn't get necessarily deeds and permission, right? They kind of sold lots and nothing was right at 5,000 square feet, which is the requirement to build a typical home.
Yeah.
So
I had
that's a minimum, 5,000 square feet?
5,000 square feet, especially in like an urban tier. So I had my challenges, and he said, not only is it a non-conforming, and you can build on it because there was an existing house here, so it's grandfathered in, but you can only make it 25% bigger than the one that was there. So I kind of had this shotgun, a very kind of long lot. It was narrow, but it went on. So the first thing that I did was just kind of go back to the drawing board and just decided just naturally, I think, or organically, that I was going to design something that I would live in. And I knew that it had to be a modest house. And so I designed a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, because I always believe that there should be a powder room, house, and made it 1 story. That was also part of the contingency. So you're only allowed to go 14 feet taller than the house next to you. But because I was non-conforming, I couldn't even do a 2nd story.
Okay.
So I decided I was just going to work with what was there and spent a lot of time just thinking about the lot and how it was going to sit and window placement and all of that. And it turned out to be pretty successful because that's when I first met you, George.
Yeah. And this was Modernist 1?
This was Modernist 1, and I sold it in a weekend. Yeah.
I love how you number them. It's like they're limited editions.
Or like Chicago albums.
Exactly. So I love
or
it.
Godfather movies.
They sort of are, yes.
Yeah.
Who decides what is conforming and what is not?
So it's based on the lot size, and then Durham has they base it off of a typical lot size should be 5,000 square feet minimum. Things have changed now that they're ADUs, but this was back in I think I started this build in 2016 and completed in 2017. So things have changed, but the planning committee decides
Okay.
Yeah, because there's you have setbacks on the left, setbacks on the right, and then you have to have a minimum backyard of 25 feet. So I guess this math somehow works.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And there's overlays and zones and things like that.
And there's and then if you're in an easement and those sorts of things as well.
Maybe you can tell me, Alicia, why are so many new buildings in Durham and Raleigh, those drab 6-story gray and tan buildings that are usually wrapped around a parking deck with tiny balconies you can't even put a chair on?
You want me to tell you why this is happening?
Why are there so many? There's like kudzu.
I wish I understood it. I mean, even as a commercial interior designer, when I was doing that work, I didn't get those sorts of projects. But I feel like the developers sort of know this formula that works because they're not all rented. So some are condos that you can buy, and then some are apartments. And we know that there's definitely at least a 30% vacancy in those apartments. But I guess the math works in terms of how much they're able to rent and how much kickbacks or how much they're able to get back in terms of incentives, right?
And taxes, too.
Yeah, exactly. Where I'm a small business, so we don't do that sort of thing. I also think like there is perhaps a client or a homeowner that, especially if you age in place and you don't want to necessarily drive anymore and you want to walk to dinner and that sort of thing, that attracts someone. I don't see that density yet in our city, but I guess it's coming. And I also think a lot of times the lots are sold for so much that there's no way you can get a return unless you build as many units as can fit. There's no way you can buy a lot for $1 million or $2 million and build a single family house.
Right.
It can't happen.
And I understand that the height was a function of that you could build, say, up to 5 or 6 stories before getting a special use permit to go higher.
Yes.
Which is more complicated.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't do any of that. I just do single family residential houses.
Now, how do you find the lots that aren't $1 million?
I know. It's been a process. So, like, I don't have necessarily someone that's out there looking for Roger and I to buy the properties. A lot of times, like with Modernist One, we found that lot. That was an auction lot. And then as we were working on the house next door, the homeowner next door, it was like there was a landlord that owned the house next door and it was vacant. And he saw what we were doing and he liked it. And he gave us first dibs to purchase that lot. And so that's how Modernist 2 came to be.
Okay.
Right next door.
Exactly. And then when those two houses were kind of siblings, right, that became sort of this story and people, kind of getting my name and my brand and my product out there. So there was a broker that contacted my broker to say that she liked our work and that there was a lot in Walltown that they would have preferred that I purchase and I developed. And so Modernist 3 was born.
Okay.
And then once I sold Modernist 3, we were the ones now searching. So we were like, okay, well, what's next, right? Could we find something? And I had found a lake property right off of Coal Mill, and I was just doing the research on what it meant to own a lake. Mm-hmm. And then Roger had found the property on State Street. We never know when we find a lot where there's an actual house on it if we're going to tear it down. So when we went to look at the property that became Modernist 4, that's when we discovered that we couldn't save that property. But at the same time, I had bought a house in the Watts-Hillendale neighborhood that was of the same era, a post-war house, and that house was better cared for. So I saved that house, but I couldn't save the other post-war house in Colonial Village. It didn't have the same care. So that was how Modernist 4 was born. 5 and 6 were empty lots that Roger and I had purchased a long time ago. The first one, we purchased an empty lot, and once we purchased that lot, the lot next door was empty, and the person that owned that lot found us and asked if we were interested in buying that lot.
Yeah.
Those houses took a while, but I actually owned those 2 lots way before I did Modernist 3 and Modernist 4. It was just kind of a construction loan thing where we were in COVID, and so the bank would not lend you any money if there wasn't like an actual property sitting on a lot. Yeah.
Right. What are you up to now? You're a Modernist what?
So 5 and 6 have just completed.
Okay.
And these are very different lots. So these lots are non-conforming. They're so small that I had to get a variance to be able to build on them. And I knew that there were existing houses there before because they were curb cuts.
Oh, for driveways?
Yeah, they were curb cuts for driveways. And so I had to get a variance with the city. I had designed them a while ago. And we were just like, what could happen to these houses? Like, do we want to keep them, right? When I submitted my drawings for the variance, I passed. And then when I submitted for permit, the planning department called me for Modernist 5. And they said, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but you're going to have to move your house 27 feet from the side, the street that runs perpendicular, which is Canal.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? like the design doesn't work if I move the house 27 feet. And I was trying to line up that house, Modernist 5, on the same side as the houses that, are on that Canal Street. And they said, well, it's a corner lot. And so the rules say that you can't obstruct that corner, so you have to move the house 27 feet in.
And you didn't know this.
And I did not know that because I passed my variance in front of a planning committee.
Right.
And so
there's a different crowd of people than the people who then said you have to move it?
Exactly, right?
Oh.
The right hand isn't talking to the, So I had a bit of a shock. And then I regrouped and I redesigned the house that night. I kind of flipped things around. And then just based on the cost of the lot, it wasn't an expensive lot. Raj and I just got to thinking, right? Like there has to be some sort of an end game. And what if we could keep one of our modernist homes and have it as an elevated stay? So the house that I bought in Watts Hillendale has become my first short stay. And I never get to stay there, right?
What's an elevated stay?
Like an Airbnb, but a really nice one.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
So
not propped up on stilts.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking too, Tom.
Yeah.
It's like, is this thing up in the air?
Not literally.
It's kind of the Ritz-Carlton of Airbnb.
Okay.
Without the Ritz-Carlton price. But we decided that it would be a nice experience as well as a future for us because we are design builders. There's no 401k. There's no retirement plan. And I don't want to be like 85, talking to plumbers, right?
Modernist 45, yeah.
Exactly. And also, I can't guarantee that I'm going to continue to find opportunities to build. And I just think it's also a great experience to experience something that we've designed and built. I've never spent the night in any of the homes I've ever finished and sold. And so I got an opportunity to spend the night a couple of weekends ago in Modernist 5. And it was just such a nice experience. We ended up staying an extra night. And so
Did you charge yourself for that as an Airbnb?
Well, I had to pay the person that came and cleaned it. And then Modernist 6, I think, is up in the air where we're holding on to it. And we'll absolutely, they're sisters, right? I call them the Hazel sisters. And
they're on Hazel Street.
They're on Hazel Street.
Okay.
So I've dubbed them the Hazel sisters, and one in the style of Grace Jones and the other in the style of Tina Turner.
What?
And just kind of this little bit of art and just kind of a personality that a house has. Yes. I'm very sort of emotional with my designs.
You can jump off of one with a parachute like she did in the James Bond film.
Absolutely. So that's where we are now. And then our future is that we have 2 more properties that we acquired throughout the existence of Hylton-Daniel, one in Walltown and the other at that lake. We ended up getting that lake. We lost it, and then we ended up getting it.
Okay. So the
It's
property
a really nice
came with the
story.
water, huh?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Nice. Now, you've been in design all along. We've heard that you made your first architectural model at age 12.
Yes.
What was it?
It was a modern house.
It was?
It was a modern house. And
Of your own design?
My own design.
Okay.
And I don't really know how this all came about. I can't remember. I loved art always. I used to always, as even a little girl, the earliest I can remember, I was always asking my mom to go to art galleries. I'd always find a reason to get into the city and go to the Met. And I was just fascinated with just art and using scraps and pasting together things. When we came to the States from Jamaica, we owned a grocery store as a little girl growing up, and we lost everything during the political turmoil of Jamaica in the 70s.
Yeah.
And so when we got here, my parents split. So my mom was, she had 4 kids, and we were all very close in age. So she was pretty preoccupied with working 1 or 2 jobs to keep food on the table. But I was really just kind of honing in on, I would get lost in art. And so just dealing with all that we were dealing with, not having a lot, I turned to just building things and just using my hands, whether that was painting or building. And so she found this photograph of me when I built this modern house, and it was like a full circle moment. And I don't know how it came to be because there was no representation. There was no one that I knew or that looked like me that was doing architecture. And so to have it become my career many years later, what do you say? It's
art imitating life?
Art imitating life. Thank you. Thank you, George.
Yeah.
Yes.
Phrases I got.
Yes.
I'll take phrases for 100.
Yes.
Now, when you did Modernist 1, in this infill lot. I assume that people were very supportive about having you come in and do this very modest, small house in the neighborhood.
They were. It was really exciting. I think when we got towards the end and people got to kind of see what it turned into, I would be at the house in the evenings just kind of getting it ready, staging it. And there would always be a car sort of stopped in front of the house. There was a couple that came all the way from like Cary, North Carolina, that heard about the house and had to come see it. I guess for its time, even though it wasn't that long ago, it was different because I decided I was going to be authentic. I wasn't going to try to do something that I wouldn't live in.
Yeah.
So I looked at this neighborhood that had sort of a lot of a kind of a mashup of houses anyway, right? It had some shotguns. It had some sort of maybe wannabe colonial. It had some Cape Cods. And I put in something that fit in. It was modern, but it was one story. And it just kind of brought this neighborhood or this house present to like where we are now. The neighbors were really excited. We gave everyone a tour of the house when we were all done. So,
but at some point, didn't the pitchforks and the torches start coming out about the houses?
Yeah, so that would be Modernist 4.
Okay.
I mean, Modernist 3 was probably a little bit controversial as well, but not with the original people of the neighborhood, right? It was in Walltown, which was an African-American neighborhood that sat next to Trinity Heights because the African-Americans in that neighborhood worked for Duke or were the nannies and the caretakers of the people, of the staff and faculty. So they had the same size lots. A lot of Walltown has that famous alley that the Trinity Parks and the Trinity Heights are known for, where you can build your house on the front and have this alley where you can park into.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there was this conversation that wasn't being had where the neighborhood was gentrified because self-help had come in and kind of built some houses, but African Americans were not coming to live in Walltown, right? Like a lot of your Southern Black neighborhoods are not being associated with a happy time.
Yeah.
So you can very rarely convince an African American that grew up in Walltown that went off to college and became educated to come back and buy into that neighborhood and maybe take their mother's house or their grandparents' house and rehab it, right? A lot of times those houses cannot be renovated because they weren't built to last. They weren't built with the same craftsmanship and the same access and resources. And a lot of them have been left vacant. So Modernist 3 was a sad story. We bought the house through a broker that knew the family, and the family was happy that we got the house. But there were a lot of problems with the house. The house didn't have running plumbing or electricity for like years. And it was so bad that when we took down the house, I was driving, it's like summertime, my windows were up. I was probably 5 blocks from the house and I smelt the stench.
Oh.
And so that was the condition of the house. And the neighbors actually thanked us for taking down the house because it was causing a lot of problems. There were a lot of issues with what was happening in the house and the soil itself. We also had to remove the soil to be able to build a healthy house.
So what were people objecting to then about it?
The fact that I took this lot that was huge and the house that was there was pretty big. And just people that don't do this work don't know what's really happening. They're watching things like HGTV and they're seeing these cute little old houses being renovated, but they just don't understand the condition of a house. You can't save a house that's not been taken care of, right? And so
they thought that you were just willy-nilly tearing down a perfectly fine house?
Perfectly fine house without ever stepping inside.
But don't these people live in houses like this as well and know that they are problematic? Or was this house sort of an exception?
I feel like, so there's many parts to it. A lot of the people that had comments about the house, I don't think ever walked down that neighborhood. It was just sort of like they wanted to be politically correct and say, oh, look what's happening, without ever understanding that neighborhood or who lives there now. But there was a lot of good that came out of it. There was an economics professor at Duke that would ride his bike and kind of watch the process and reached out to us, and we actually did a talk with his class. There were the older neighbors that are still in Walltown. They're very few and far between that enjoyed what we did. I was unapologetic about literally building a house that would have been the same square footage that is right next door to it in Trinity Park because the lot was that large.
Yeah.
We started building the house pre-COVID and finished it right in the midst of COVID. And it was kind of genius because I literally designed a house that you could
build while socially distanced?
Yes, thank you. You could socially distance in this house. It had a main floor, primary bedroom with its own cutout like terrace, like its own little porch, and you'd walk upstairs to floating stairs, and then it had a second floor primary as well, with its own lounge and a couple of bedrooms up there. And so it is, to this date, the largest house I've ever built.
It's beautiful, yeah. Really beautiful.
Thank you.
So that's Modernist 3.
It's Modernist 3.
By the time you got to Modernist 4,
Yes.
for lack of a better phrase, you really got some hateful critics.
I did.
That came on the scene. People who should know better.
And you would think, yes, people that should know better and ought to know better. You know, first of all, that neighborhood's called Colonial Village.
Okay.
And we could just kind of start talking from that end of it.
Right.
And the reason why it's called Colonial Village, I read this in a blog from a woman that was looking to buy into the neighborhood, and she was a white woman, and she was concerned about gentrification. But she was like, but there's not a lot of African Americans in this neighborhood, so what's the story? And so she uncovered that they purposely called themselves Colonial Village way back when to separate themselves from the Ellerby Creek neighborhood, which would have been the African American neighborhood.
So it's sort of like a secret form of redlining in a way?
Yes.
It's a code word.
It's
Not
a
so
code
secret,
word.
yeah.
Like Plantation Acres.
Exactly.
Right.
And so what you'll find in Colonial Village, a lot of the homes mirror sort of the secondary and tertiary homes of Watts Hillendale, where they're post-war homes. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of infill of new construction as well, sort of in the craftsman new home fashion.
Bungalow type
Exactly,
of things.
right? You bungalow on the outside, but open floor plan and very schizophrenic on the inside, right? And I am not doing that.
Right.
I'm never going to do that. That's just not who I am. And so when I came on the scene, as I do with all the houses that we've done, I spend a lot of time on the lot being thoughtful and thinking about how the house is going to sit. And I pushed it further back, and I measured the roof line of the house to the left and the house to the right, and my house lines up perfectly. It is not taller, but we had the opportunity, because the lot drops in the back as it did before, that we could build a walkout basement, which made sense, especially how we live today, especially as we're coming out of a pandemic. And I thought about it, how I would live there is to have the main house on the main floor, disconnect the basement, but the basement could be an apartment. It could be, sort of
the proverbial mother-in-law apartment.
Yeah.
Or an office, right? You could work from home. And as luck would have it, the women that bought the house, they own a company. And so that was perfect for them.
So what was all the resistance about?
So what I found out, and it was shocking, and I'm still sort of triggered by it, was that I was being targeted from the inception of us taking the house down. It was being videoed and photographs were being taken. And then it was being uploaded on a Facebook site, the Teardowns of Durham, where I was being discussed, commentary or false narratives of what was happening without knowing what was there. Somehow the house could be saved. The house had an illegal addition, which, according to my structural engineer, possibly had an electrical fire. So when we went to look at the house before we determined that it was a tear down, I always go on site with my structural engineer. And there were parts of the house that we couldn't walk in, because he felt it wasn't structurally sound because it was like charred. So that,
That's a giveaway.
That's a hint.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Excuse me, but my dining room is medium well.
Yeah, right.
The foundation also had what I called cased openings. Like they were like, doorways into the foundation, right?
What? That weren't built there.
Exactly.
Oh.
So it was
so the fiction of this Facebook page was, this house is perfectly fine. Why is this lady tearing down this outstanding piece of domestic engineering?
Exactly. And you hit it right on the nail, is that it was very personal. So it wasn't like I'm a corporation, because I'm not. Links to who I am. It's all sort of kind of funny and insane and toxic at the same time, because all of this was happening, but I'm sitting on the board of Preservation Durham, And I did the opening talk for the house tour where I discuss when a house is worth saving, when a house has to be torn down, and in between.
Well, were there any adults in the room that came to you and said, "Hey, I'm blah, blah, blah. I want to talk with you about my concerns on this"?
Absolutely not.
Really?
No one.
Ain't social media great?
Exactly.
It's just the wave of the future.
There were a lot of people, though, on this page or whatever you call it, this Facebook page, that had my back, that knew my work and understood how I worked, commented back because I wasn't allowed to comment back. The moment I responded, they blocked me. So you have to
Really?
I was like, you're saying this, so here's actually what happened. Here's the story.
They blocked you?
They blocked me.
Wow.
So...
Wow.
Because they have to keep the false narrative alive, right?
Yeah.
The moment I tell my side, then that kind of dismantles this false story.
And then, oh my God, we have a dialogue.
Yeah.
We can't have that.
And then
we can't have any of those nasty facts get in the way.
Right. So is this still ongoing?
I don't know because I'm blocked and I don't want to know. It's so traumatic. NC Modernists reached out and asked if they could have a tour of the house. And they went so far as to accuse me of charging people a fee to get into the house and laughed at the fact that it was the only house on this tour, like it wasn't worthy of the tour. Uh-huh. But what was also nice, though, is that the homeowners had no idea this was all going on, right? And so it was like the neighbor started all of this, kind of got it going. And through all of this, as I was dealing with unpacking all of this, they reached out to me and basically said that they had no idea that this was going on and that the neighbors befriended them and they had them over for brunch and they walked the house and loved the house and had no idea that they were watching the house. So it was not only during the actual build, it was after the homeowners purchased the house and were living there, they were still being watched and surveilled, exactly. And it's just something where it kind of borders on the insanity, just over a house. Is that
just a function of that particular neighborhood? Because you didn't encounter this in other places.
I didn't. So hopefully just this neighborhood.
Okay.
I haven't encountered it in anywhere else. And I just think it's just people that are just bored and have a lot of time on their hands and have to have something on their plate. And, with this Facebook page, there were a lot of professionals. There was an architect and an interior designer that felt that they needed to add on to all that was happening as well.
So can you determine the identities of some of these folks through that Facebook page? And
yes.
Maybe do an in run and talk to them directly? Or is this more like you just want to leave it be?
Never wrestle with a pig, Tom,
exactly.
because it just gets dirty and it annoys the pig.
Yeah.
She's not a pig.
No, not her.
I hope not. Yeah, I think I'm going to spend my time working on building Hylton-Daniel.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend my time on my development, on my designs, on who we are and who we want to be. I'm not going to waste my time with trying to convince people that I really don't care one way or another.
Have your daughters gotten into this? Are they building little models at 12 or are they into something else?
I wish they were. Fortunately, they're into something else. So my oldest daughter is 25 and she lives in New York. She studied and is a classical pianist and does composition. Oh. She finished her fellowship with the New York Times where she was doing production and music, sort of background music for podcast.
Okay.
And
she's one of those people that does the music on the daily?
Yes, she did a little bit of that.
Oh, wow.
And now she's doing a little bit of producing and music for Vogue Fashion as well as the New Yorker. So she kind of contracts for those. And then my youngest is finishing up at Durham School of the Arts and wants to have absolutely nothing to do with design and architecture. Unfortunately, she's more interested in environmental science, but maybe she'll be a structural engineer later with that background.
Yeah. Well, we have a planet needs saving, so there's that too, right?
Can help me build more kind of eco-friendly modernists. But for now, that's where they are, and they're happy doing that.
Alicia, thank you so much for coming in. It's such a pleasure to talk with you and hear your story.
Thank you, George. I really appreciate you having me on.
Daniel Munteanu is a third-generation architect and urban planner based in Suceava, Romania. Educated at the Technical University of Iași in Romania and the Berlage in the Netherlands, Daniel has exhibited at several Venice Architecture Biennales and contributed to the Chicago Architecture Biennial. These are two well-known architecture expos that happen every 2 years. Daniel is the founder and editor of the research project Of Houses, a collection of old forgotten houses, an original collection of wildly popular daily posts that showcase older and often unknown architectural gems. I've followed Daniel for years and learned a lot about houses that we've later documented at U.S. Modernist. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you for the invitation, George.
So, Daniel, you have described yourself, I believe, as a willing prisoner of architecture. So, how did you get into jail?
I got into jail in 1998 when I was admitted at the university studying architecture and became a voluntary prisoner of the architecture library, basically, ever since.
Do you have visiting hours?
Of course, visiting hours are most of the time, because being a voluntary prisoner of architecture and doing editorial work, writing, curating, etc., it's not my main work. I'm also a designer. I have my own studio doing architecture and urban planning. And like everybody, I also have a family. So I guess that this part of my profession is mainly dedicated to the weekends.
I see. Now, architecture is a family affair for you. Your grandfather was an architect.
My grandfather was an engineer.
Okay.
A technical engineer. My wife is an architect. Her sister is an architect. Her father was an architect. So most of the architects in the family come from my wife's side.
Okay.
So you married into architecture.
Something like that. We were colleagues at the university.
Architecture wasn't your original choice for a career, was it?
I mean, it's hard to say. I wanted to become an artist. I went to the art high school, but then I somehow realized that maybe I'm not as inspired or original or proficient to dedicate my life to the art. So I chose architecture as a more secure career. And then I immediately fell in love into it, and I never regret it.
Did your time at art school influence how you see architecture now?
It's difficult to say. I think that mainly the classes in art history influenced me a lot.
When did you start your blog Of Houses?
I think I started Of Houses in 2014, so 9 years ago. I never imagined this to last for so long, but then it happened.
Do you remember your first post, what that was?
Absolutely. The first post was about a house in Japan by Katsumasa Yamashita. It is known as the Face House, but later I discovered that the correct translation would be the face of the house.
When you were doing the posts, were you doing just one photo per house, or were you doing several of each house?
When I started the blog, I drew some rules which have stayed ever since. These rules are that I only publish built houses, and I maintain a schedule of publishing a house every 3 or 4 days. So for 9 years, I have been doing this. In the beginning, I thought of publishing the 3 best photos of the projects, but later on, I enlarged this number to 10. So no more than 10, but usually more than 3 or 4.
And each of the houses has to be at least 20 years old, right?
That was the initial idea, but the rule has changed a bit. So now it is only about houses built in the 20th century.
Okay. Have there been any houses or architects, Daniel, that you wanted to feature but couldn't find photos?
Absolutely. Documenting is the main part of the activity. Scanning photos, hunting for images online. I also collect the drawings, even though I don't publish them. They will be featured in another project that hopefully will be made into a book
Oh,
with all
good.
the plans of the houses that I published on Of Houses, redrawn by me, which is a gargantuan job. So I'm barely at 60% of that project, but still working hard to complete it. And yes, it's difficult. And it is all related to the original publications and to the archives. So if the original architect or the owners took the bother to take the photos, to spread them around, to publish them, to index them, then there are good chances for me to eventually find them. If not, yeah, it happens. It happens for many, many extremely beautiful projects to only be documented by one photo only.
If you've been doing this for 9 years, I'm guessing that's around 1,000 postings at this point?
A bit more than 1,000.
A bit more than 1,000. And you have fans.
Well, I feel awkward at the moment speaking about fans. I don't know if I have fans or not.
You have fans, Daniel. Yes.
That's not my concern, absolutely. But yeah, traveling around, I encounter a lot of architects from all over the world. And when Of Houses is mentioned, chances are that many of them have been followers of this project. So let's say that I have an audience.
I think you do. Absolutely, you have an audience. Does this audience send things to you? Do they find photos too and send them in?
Yes. I mean, speaking about the community and so on, seems like this jargon of web-related activities. So I can't say that it is a community, but it is obviously a circle of friends and acquaintances and even people that I don't know who I communicate with online, and they help me in making this project possible. Absolutely.
One of the things that I really love about your site is that you find some exquisite black and white photos of some of the houses. Very high resolution, very sharp, many of which I've never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, every time I try to publish the best photographs available. So from all of the documentation that I gather, I try to choose the best ones. Some of them are very good. Some of them are, let's say, in a lower resolution or quite badly scanned. But most of the time, the photos are pretty good. And absolutely all of the photographs are photoshopped by me, because I had this very weird idea that all the photographs have to be the same size.
Ah, okay.
So more than, I don't know, 10,000 photographs on my blog, they are all of the same size, either in portrait or in landscape. So every photo was cropped by me, and yeah, I play a bit with the contrast and so on.
Now, Daniel, do you take any of these photographs yourself, or are these all taken by other people?
I am not a very good photographer, I have to say. So even though I visited some of these projects, very, very few, and I took photographs, in the end, no, I did not publish those photos because there are better photographs around.
Now, you've had several guest curators on the site.
Indeed.
Who are some of the people that have contributed to Of Houses?
Yeah, when I had more time at my disposal, I really enjoyed playing with this project, like it was a real, I don't know, magazine, let's say. So to invite people, architects, critics, fellow bloggers, journalists, to just curate one such a selection of 7 houses that comprise, let's say, one issue. And for some years, I really enjoyed doing that, because then I also discover a lot, right? You never can know everything. So I discover a lot, and I tried to work with people from all the continents, from Australia, from South America, North America, Europe, Asia, and so on. And it was quite great. Unfortunately, for the past, I think, 2 years, I was not able to go on with this protocol, but I plan to start again. Also, there are a lot of people who are emailing me with proposals to guest curate of houses. And yeah, this will return.
Oh, wonderful. Of Houses has contributed to your projects. In 2016, your Unfolding Pavilion, which was an exhibition for the VS Biennale. Tell us a little more about your Unfolding Pavilion show.
Yeah, these projects are starting to interfere with one another. So for Of Houses, I invited one Italian critic, Davide Tommaso Ferrando, to be a guest curator. Then he invited me to write something for the magazine that he was publishing at the time. And we collaborated very, very well in these little side projects. And then at one moment, I was working at the competition for the design of the Romanian pavilion at the Biennale in 2016. And I had a lot of ideas that I think were quite good. But then I realized that no, the Ministry of Culture of Romania, who is handling the pavilion, will never allow such weird ideas to be put into the pavilion itself, because these pavilions are related to a country. And of course, you have to take into account some other, let's say, more diplomatic or critical issues that are not necessarily related to what you want to show or to present to the people who come to the Biennale. So since I didn't knew pretty much anyone in Italy at the time, I just wrote an email to Davide asking him, hey man, would you be willing to do an independent pavilion for the Biennale? And he immediately said yes.
Ah, lovely.
So starting from that moment, we grew a conversation. And we established also some rules, like doing an independent pavilion, which is not attached to any institution or to any country, but attached to an idea to hunt for the best exhibition spaces in Venice, for the best architecture, and to convert these spaces into temporary exhibition spaces and to do in their exhibitions that take the space of the exhibition itself as the main actor and the main inspiration. So that's how this Unfolding Pavilion came about. We did in 2016 the first edition inside an apartment in a building that was never opened for the public, Ignazio Gardella's Casa Alezzatere, a very famous bourgeois condominium from the mid-century. And we managed to rent an apartment for 1 week, to organize an exhibition inside that place, and to open the building for the public. And we were astonished by the hundreds of visitors that we had. And all the people said, yeah, but you have to continue. So we continued. And we did it again in 2018 in a social housing project designed by Gino Vale on the Giudecca Island. And we did it again 2 years ago during the pandemic inside of a boat that was moored in front of the Punta della Dogana. And we will do it again this year as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Hopefully, we will open our fourth Unfolding Pavilion in Venice.
That's a lot of work, Daniel, and quite an honor. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a work, yes, but it's also a hobby. So it's a labor of love.
Absolutely. Well, as is your blog, where can people find Of Houses?
It's ofhouses.com. I know that Of Houses is a very weird name, but it's a sort of an acronym of Old Forgotten Houses. So
Yes.
It's easier to remember like this. You find it on ofhouses.com, but also on all major social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr.
Thanks so much for talking with us, Daniel. It's a pleasure.
It's been an honor to be invited here, and I want to also congratulate you for your work. ANSI Modernist is one of the main resources for me whenever I try to document particularly North American architecture. And the resources that you made available to the public are fabulous, really fabulous.
It's our pleasure.
And I'm sure we will soon enough collaborate in one way or the other.
Good.
I don't want to say that I invite you now to be a guest curator, but keep this in mind, because it might happen in the autumn.
It might happen. Okay. Well, that's very nice. Thanks again, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 20,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.1 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Kelly Policelli did our guest research. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back next week with another installment from Modernist Week in Palm Springs, poolside of U.S. Modernist Radio.